What's up YouTube, this is GalacticGod and I'm coming at you today with a video talking about the ethics of trading. Now everyone in our community knows that whenever you make some kind of trade deal you always want a plus, meaning you want to get more than what you're giving up. And that seems to be a pretty, commonality between everyone, that if you're going to make a trade deal you always want to get the better end of it. Now, the real problem comes when you're making some kind of trade with someone who doesn't know the exact value of the cards. But if they did know the exact value, wouldn't you be making an equal trade? Would you ever possibly come up or plus off of a trade? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about a story, the ultimate plus, if you will, about something that happened to me a long time ago when I first started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In fact, or at least when I first started becoming knowledgeable in the game and I started really knowing and understanding the value of cards. And I'm going to give you guys a little story of something that happened to me, and then I'm going to pose the question to you: was that right? Was it ethical what I did? This is something that I talked about a long time ago in one of my first videos, so a lot of people have probably never heard this story before. Now, when I first started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Was around the time of Magician's Force or so, maybe a little bit before that set came out. But when I really started taking the game seriously was around the time of Invasion of Chaos. Right when Black Luster Soldier, BLS himself, Chaos Emperor Dragon, DMOC, all these powerful cards really came into fruition at that time. And the prices of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards really started skyrocketing, especially those ones I just mentioned. Now at this time I was living on my own, or with some roommates really, and I was living in this apartment complex, and I was coming home from a trip to Frankenstein's one day, and I was rummaging through all the cards that I had picked up or had bought in packs and whatnot, and I was just making my way from my vehicle over to my apartment, and a bunch of kids that lived in the complex kind of noticed that I was going through cards, and they came running up over to me. And they were like, "Oh my gosh, you play Yu-Gi-Oh! Or you collect Yu-Gi-Oh!" And they had all these fascinating questions because they'd never seen an adult, or a young adult at that time, that played Yu-Gi-Oh! And they were really taken back by this, because normally I'm sure their parents were like, "Oh, I don't want to buy these cards for you. Why do you watch this show? Why do you collect these things?" Or something of that nature. And they were all excited that there was someone that was older that was into the game. And they were asking me which cards I had, and did I have, Dark Magician, or did I have Blue Eyes, or Summon Skull, or all these really popular cards that were in the anime. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I have those cards." Those were like, those are easy cards to get because they came in structure decks and they were common and whatever. But they were really, excited that I had those cards, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, will you trade with us? Will you trade? Can I bring my cards over and we can trade?" And at first I was kind of like, "Oh my god, I don't want to trade with all these little kids." And I was like, I guess so. If you guys want to bring them over, I'll take a look at it. And they were all excited, and they all ran back to their apartments. And I went into mine. I didn't really think much of it, but like a few minutes later, I started getting knockings at the door, and I came over, and it was like all these kids with all their cards. And they weren't really in trade binders or anything like that. They didn't really take care of them per se. Most of them were in like shoe boxes or tins or whatever. And they were no sleeves on anything. They're all loosely in there. And they were like, "Oh, trade with me, trade with me." And they were just excited, I think, to trade with an actual adult, not, other little kids. So I started rummaging through their cards. I was going to make just some real quick little trades with them just to appease them and make them happy. And I noticed, through rummaging through their cards that they had some holographic ones in there. And then I started coming across cards like Yatagarasu and Mirror Force and Dark Magician of Chaos and Chaos Dragon and BLS and all the DD Warrior Lady, all these really prevalent cards at the time that were actually, quite a bit of money. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you have this one?" And I was like, "Would you trade this?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, sure. And I was like, "Oh wow, crazy." So I started showing them, my cards, and, cards of equal value at first. And they were like, "Oh, well, don't you have like Dark Magician or something?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, but I mean, do you want Dark Magician for Mirror Force?" And they were like, "Oh, yeah, for sure. That's like Yugi's best monster." And I was like, well, I have one." I was like, "Are you sure this is all you want for it?" And they were like, oh, yeah. And I was like, all right, I mean, if that's what you want." And then another person had a Yada or something. And I was like, "Well, what do you want?" And they're like, "Well, do you have a Summon Skull?" And I was like, "Well, I have a common Summon Skull." And they're like, "Common, what's that?" And I was like, "The non-shiny ones." And they're like, "Oh, okay, whatever." And, and I was like, "All you want is a common Summon Skull?" And they were like, "Oh, yeah, that's great." And I was like, "What? That's not really, like, worth the same." And I was like, "Oh, do you need more for it?" And I was like, "No, I mean, yours is worth more. And they were like, what? Like, they didn't understand. Now, the cards they were giving me were, you know, in very played condition too, because they were bouncing around in a tin. They weren't super mint or anything like that. And so at the end of the day, I had gotten all these cards that were super valuable and very much used in the meta at the time for a bunch of cards that were relatively worthless. I mean, some of them were holographic, but most of them were, you know, commons or rares, but they were cards that were used in the anime by the main characters, and they were what those kids really wanted. And it would be, to equate it in terms of today, it would be like trading a Utopia for a Draco sack or something like that. And, you know, that was kind of the value that I was coming up on. And I was talking to a buddy of mine later that night on the phone about it, and I, you know, kind of felt a little bad, like I'd ripped off these kids or something. And he told me I shouldn't really think of it that way, that, you know, the kids got essentially what they wanted, and you got what you wanted out of the trade. Everybody was happy with what the outcome of the trade was, and that if you think of it another way, those kids would have ultimately seriously destroyed those cards. Because there were a lot of cards that were almost crumpled up, you know, in the tin as well. And he was saying eventually those cards would be utterly worthless because, you know, they weren't going to take care of them or use them in any kind of competitive sense, and that I shouldn't feel bad about that. So my question to you guys is this: was that a fair trade? Now, ultimately, both parties got what they wanted out of the trade deal. Monetarily speaking, though, the differences were very askew. The cash value of the cards they received was dramatically different than the cash value of the cards that I received, but sometimes people put value on cards differently, more than just what they are monetarily. So, was what I did an ethical trade? Should I have pushed harder to try and give them more cards, or should I just have accepted that as the pluses one gets when making a trade deal? In the comment section below, let me know your thoughts on this subject. Would you have tried harder to give them more cards, or would you have taken those pluses? Would you have not traded at all with the kids? Would you have done what I did and came up on those trades? I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on this subject. And I guess that's going to do it for now. This is GalacticGod, out.